Hello?
Hey man, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay,
I lost you as soon as you started. Sorry.
I'm back on Bluetooth and I moved to my cell network. So hopefully this will go well. I apologize for that.
All good.
Yeah. All right, dude. Let me give you a recap. Today I spent like the last 3 hours just staring at a screen, DMing people on Telegram, trying to look at Circle balance sheet and make sense of it because what happens to USDC affects both the startup that I'm part of, my personal finances, the industry itself. So just trying to assess risk, and it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
No one seems to really have an answer.
Yeah. I think that's obviously the main topic of the day. Pretty fearful stuff. But I just want to get started, introduce you a bit before we get into like the news part. I really appreciate you like coming on and taking the time and probably your most stressful moment in crypto. So I really appreciate that. And for people who don't know, Matt is actually the founder and CEO of Uniwhales DAO, giant DAO, very community driven, like building like probably the biggest group of just like alpha hunting chads in the space. And you guys are building CLO, tracking like 100,000 contracts or different EVM chains, everything to do with DeFi and NFT analytics. So I just want to start with that and pick your brain on what you did today on chain that kind of highlights your career in the space.
Oh man, or what did I not do on chain? I think sometimes I want to start out with a couple things just to clarify. Uniwhales DAO is the community that Timur and I started, and then so is the analytics app. Uniwhales DAO community, then Yellow is like the analytics app that we have, just so people don't get confused. But yeah, it's a good question. I don't even think sometimes I think we've been in crypto for so long now that I think like how did you discover crypto? Those questions I don't think they're really that interesting. I'm happy to expand upon it, but I think for your audience it's more interesting. Yeah, we're doing on-chain activity and building this out and trying to like make a sense of the crypto markets and blockchain activity, not by the aggregate, like looking at TVL or volume or token price, but more finding individuals and tracking their behavior and building lists of wallets and getting an idea for sentiment and DeFi NFT project discovery. And that's the way we think we should build a fingertip feel. So that's the thesis of what we do. Today, I'm always checking a lot of swaps from smaller stablecoins like LUSD, USDC to Tether. And then I'm asking myself the question, do I need to move out of USDC? And there's a part of me, man, I'm at a really beautiful beach location right now. And the host or like the owner of this like small hotel invited us over like dinner last night and I had all this whiskey and I like woke up today feeling okay, but I was just so overwhelmed, honestly, by this circle stuff because I didn't think that I was expecting FUD and a drop on the ETH price, but I didn't expect like circle to potentially be hit. And again, we're still waiting on news there. So maybe
Yeah,
that's
I think
go
this
ahead.
is like
Yeah.
one of those moments that's like a people are gonna look on as like a badge of honor in this kind of space. And I'm curious to like hear your like top three memories that you feel are like your badges of honor, highlighting your history in the space. Obviously, excluding today. We'll get that badge at the end of this.
Yeah, that's a good question. Top three. I think, wow, it's really hard not to say FTX. I was never really a fan of FTX, but obviously the fallout was insane and like the amount of fraud. But yeah, and there's also a recency bias, right? Because so many things happen that's hard. I'd say badge of honor. Does badge of honor mean going through an adverse event or could also be like a really good event?
Yeah, just like what you look back on and something heartwarming or something terrible where you thought it was all over and just like some hope for the people. I feel like a lot of people enjoy to hear that hope, especially at times like this.
Oh,
I know I
yeah.
do.
Yeah, I can tell you that I've had some pretty excruciating moments trying to do like basic banking things like send international wire transfers for modest amount. Like definitely nothing on the scale like where like it has anywhere close to like global banking, but just all of the headaches there. So every time I actually have to deal with, and it's funny because considering there's like a fractional bank, right, that's having an issue right now, but it affects crypto. Like I will say maybe that's it. That's it right there. I'll just go with one that like every time you have to deal with the bank and you see all the shenanigans and the KYC theater, all that stuff, it reminds you like why you're doing this. And I think that's probably the big silver lining of today that everyone should remember. I think if you're just like living in the US and maybe you're not involved in crypto, but you probably won't be listening to this, but you haven't had to deal with any banking issues, it may not hit home as much, but those that have traveled and moved funds around and started businesses in industries that like lack regulatory clarity, I think it's that reminder of how difficult and discriminatory the banking system is, does give renewed faith even though you're like, oh wow, like I hope USDC is figures things out here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you a lot of people when you've been in the space for a while, and I feel like time goes by a lot slower, feels like a lot harder being in this space. Do you think like being in this space does actually require some form of like mental illness? And how do you like keep that healthy balance? Being someone who's founding their own project, starting their thing, I'm sure you've got like those DMs and those messages, like you're the person that people go to when they say devs do something. And so I was really trying to understand like what that stress is like on you, how you handle that, and how you just handled this whole journey.
Yeah, just to be clear, like I don't code at all at Cielo. That's like Teamer and the team, but like being there in the trenches and strategy and product design and like all the parts of the startup. Yeah, the mental illness question is quite interesting. I'd say that it's a fair question. I'd say that there's a lot of there are some costs to this. I think that the fact that it's a 24/7 market, the regulatory issues, I go back and forth, man. Every week I'll have these times where I'm like, I just feel so pumped and feel so much momentum, and then I'll have almost like a down moment. So there's like a lot of ups and downs that come with it. But I don't think you have to have a mental illness, but I think there's got to be an obsession and a long-term mindset. And I think that there are maybe some of the biggest costs I see is that I do believe in the very cliche like long-term games with long-term people, and you have to think in 5 to 10 years when you're doing a startup. Even though in crypto, like the fluke examples of someone getting rich very quickly. So yeah, I think that because of all like the dopamine and it's like a casino. And so if you have an issue with the like we're building analytics tools for what's a very speculative market right now. And so you have to exist and have a clear mind in a dopamine fueled speculative market. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. So, hopping into like the news of the day, I know you went into a little bit on like your thoughts on the whole USDC thing and with all the banking stuff. And I actually talked to Ali about this a bit. And I feel like I was a little bit behind on this. So I don't know all of the facts, but from what I did in terms of due diligence previously, when like debating USDC and USDT and all that kind of stuff, because I feel like this kind of stablecoin stuff happens very often. My faith, and I feel like a lot of people's faith in USDC was very high up until this point. And I think what part of it has shooken you the most to where you're just not able to sleep at night, it sounds
I think that okay. So there, we always tend to overreact, right? When in both the extreme like FUD and like FOMO, right? It's never as good or as bad as it seems. So I am reminded that speaking to you, and you have a pretty chill, like steady demeanor, which I know it's about you. I'd say that I think the unsettling thing would be like understanding how you feel. Like, okay, are you familiar with Nick Carter and Operation Choke Point?
yeah, very much.
It seems like if I were orchestrating as like the anti-crypto devil, etc., and trying to like have all the dominoes fall, some FUD around USDC and swaying public opinion even more anti-crypto because this is supposed to be like the safe stablecoin. I think there's thoughts around that, and they're not always rational, right? Fear sets in, and you're unable to think clearly. And I think that's probably top of this. What does that mean? And then I think, what does it mean for the industry? The same questions, right? Like, it's the fear creates a set of questions that you start asking yourself in your head, and it creates a fog, and the fog of war, right? And so that's maybe kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think for me, when stuff like this tends to happen, and I definitely have way less exposure to this than you do, and I feel like most people do, generally, I have to figure out what the worst case scenario is and what that means for me. And if you just want to go into just mind mapping what the worst case is and what's the worst thing that can happen from this? And obviously, I feel like because when the Binance FUD happened, the biggest question was would people survive without Binance? Would this space even exist without Binance? And then it comes to, okay, Ethereum didn't even exist. Would people be in this space? And I think for a lot of people, Ethereum is that line, and USDC was that line that people weren't even thinking about until now. And so, do you think that there's life without USDC
Yeah, I think
in this?
so. But here's where it's very hard to predict. But I would think Binance or Coinbase or USDC, if they go belly up, which I don't know if it's that likely. So I don't want to like spread alarm. It's just like when there's uncertainty, even if it's like a 0.05% chance or whatever it is, and maybe it's higher than that, you start to think that way, right? The worst case scenario. So I'd say that it's more like how long does it take to recover? And like I was okay, so I can tell you I was there in the last bear market in like 2000, mid 2018 through 2019. Like nothing's happening. It's grim, right? And you ask yourself the question, like we all have a finite amount of time on Earth. Am I going to sit around for 3 years in this space where there like could be this huge payoff because you're that person that kept quote unquote building, learning, doing whatever you do, or a contribution you can make to this industry. But maybe not. Maybe you'll think of shifting to something else. And I think a lot of us that get so into cryptocurrency and just to make sure there's nothing ambiguous here. Obviously, I know there's many exciting, interesting things that have nothing to do with Ethereum and Bitcoin. But you say, hey, maybe it's time for me to move on to something else, and that I think that can be a pretty heavy thing for a lot of people to weigh.
Yeah. And I think one of the aspects of events like this that I like to dwell on is the ability to profit off something like this, the ability for a narrative to form around this. I think a lot of this distrust and uncertainty is what something like crypto is made for. And when you start to develop like that mindset of, okay, what's next? In my head, it leans to things like Rari and you mentioned LUSD and those other aspects. I'm a big fan of. They just announced a, I think $4.5 million seed around Gyroscope. They're building a stable coin. They've been doing it since the whole Luna UST crash. I feel like a lot of people knocked off this market and this sector of crypto as UST failed. And the appetite for people in the algo stable or even any other stable has just left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Do you think there's opportunity there? And are you searching at all for something like that?
I'm a little bit kind of beaten by the markets. Let me just forward you something here on Telegram, right?
Yeah.
I just saw this. I thought this was really clever. So this person just deposited Tether into Aave and then they borrowed USDC. So I don't think I don't think USDC is going to move. I think it'll probably be 1-to-1 at best. And if USDC stables, so if USDC exit lease because of a bank run or whatever, right? They could take that USDC loan, they could swap to Tether and then wait for it to come back, swap back to USDC, right? So they could essentially short USDC. I guess they could immediately swap to Tether. Sorry, they could immediately swap to Tether. Then if USDC eggs, they could play that arbitrage. But I thought that was interesting. But yeah, there's maybe I don't think we should give up on decentralized stablecoins, truly decentralized stabilized coins because of Terra Luna, which I thought at least for maybe till the last couple months seemed like a really legitimate effort by Terra, even if it was misguided and extremely risky. So yeah, I think it's great that people keep trying to solve this problem because there's obviously a huge market demand for this, right?
Yeah, definitely. Any other aspects of this whole USDC thing you want to touch on
And
before
then
we
we
like
can
start
move
to
on.
say?
It's just like one of those days, man, where it's hard to. I think of it. There's probably like NFT community groups that are like doing like in their Discord. They're oblivious to this. Yeah. So what's the upcoming drop we have for like our silver pass holders? It is the thing, but I tell you, you put together a nice agenda. I'm happy to go into that too and just cover that. Like that's totally fine because this could be cleared up. Recording March 9th, it could be cleared up by Monday. It'd be cool if we touched on some other subjects to make this a little bit more, make this podcast a little bit more relevant for a longer time.
Yeah, for sure. I think the USDC stuff is, like you said, when people are fearful, it's going to be a lot. People are going to think it's worse than it might actually be. But honestly, I tend to be wrong on a lot of those things. So I could be completely off here. Like you said, in a few days, it might be fun to look back on this podcast and recording and see what our mindset was and what happened, which is like the reason me and Ali even started this kind of thing. So I also enjoy that aspect. Like, just putting our head onto into the world and our thoughts into the world and kind of being able to track our own thoughts in such a fast moving, like very emotional space. I think like a decent aspect to talk about following something like USDC and that whole like stablecoin narrative is the idea of decentralization. So me and Ollie were talking, and he mentioned Frax as one of the alternatives to this USDC drama, like not bring how much risk they are to USDC itself. And so I think it's an interesting narrative to touch on, just the idea of how important decentralization is to people. And I remember when the OFAC stuff happened, and that whole chart is available somewhere where it's just like how many validators were just OFAC compliant and versus the entire Ethereum network, and that number got pretty high. And I'm curious how much you value something like decentralization when you're like navigating this space? Is that like a big part of your like core beliefs from when you started in this space?
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's a lot to think about.
It's just hard to. Were you an alt L1 guy or were you like Ethereum
Oh no, I was
maxi?
actually I wouldn't say I was close to Messi, but I when I got into crypto, I worked at Bitcoin.com, and I was really into Bitcoin Cash, and so I
Hmm.
learned a lot of lessons from that. And it was like I don't know if you know this, but like Vitalik was a big blocker. There was like a lot of Solana is interesting because Solana is very similar to Bitcoin Cash in a lot of ways and like that vision, right? But the community didn't really work out, and even though I'm not like concede that Bitcoin has quote unquote won, even though I'm not super excited about like the state of Bitcoin and like just their new kind of follow the law Ethereum is security. It's really saddening to see, but I learned the importance of like community and culture, and like Bitcoin Cash didn't quite have it there. But yeah, like I think I learned also though during the during the last run where I think thinking in probabilities is better. So I'm not an ETH maxi by any means. I really like Cosmos actually. So I think he even tweeted about Babylon, and I actually followed that project for quite some time. I'd say
Yeah.
that, man, I'm an ETH maxi, I'm a Cosmos maxi. I like Bitcoin, I like OpenSea, I like Blur. I like just about all of it, man. Like I'm rooting for all this experimentation.
Yeah, I think my general rule when it would come to this I immediately understood the crypto stuff because of the decentralization aspect, just because of like my Middle Eastern backgrounds and stuff, and like just seeing a bunch of failing economies, it felt right for that idea of quote unquote financial freedom, yada. And so that's what got me to immediately click on this. And so I was like an alt L1 hater because of the decentralization aspects. And so when that OFAC stuff came out, it's like how this KuCoin stuff came out where they're labeling ETH as a security. And it's also why I'm very calm about the USDC thing. I just feel like the like world of Ethereum is just generally not gonna be stopped. Like
Yeah.
it's not gonna not work. It's fought so many things already. And it sounds cheesy, but I was just curious what your like thoughts were on that aspect of Ethereum.
Yeah, I know. You make a good point. The like if you're gonna build a new financial system that threatens the incumbents, as long as like the politicians and regulators don't own enough crypto, basically I always look at that. Like how many senators and Congress people own crypto at the moment, right? Yeah, I think a lot about that.
Yeah.
And like the more that own it, honestly, the better, right? But as long as they can make more money from fighting crypto than they can on the crypto themselves, like they're gonna fight. And so I don't think Ethereum can be stopped either. Bitcoin has to figure out with transaction fees and like maybe ordinals plus Babylon chain plus a variety of like horizontal like use cases like that will be enough to get the transaction fees for Bitcoin is in its place. And I think notice I didn't even mention the Lightning Network, but like the yeah, you're thinking very clear headed today, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And you were talking about Babylon. I honestly thought it was crazy. I listened to some podcast from the Blockworks guys, and they had the Roll Kit guys on talking about how they're using like Bitcoin as like a DA layer and a security layer. They were just using that example to highlight that it can be tapped in basically into any data availability layer. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin in general? You mentioned a little bit of Bitcoin, your history with coin and Bitcoin Cash. Are you of the agreement of like their security model is going to run out and like they need to generate more on-chain and block space demand? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say that, okay, again, I don't know, right? Like I own some Bitcoin, I own some Ethereum. I guess I feel more confident that like they're both going to be around in some aspect. I don't think either one's going to be, I think they'll both be around like 5, 10 years from now, but I don't know if they're going to be number one or number two. It's very hard to figure these things out. But I will say that with Bitcoin, yeah, the Babylon thing is so interesting, right? Because like for all these Cosmos chains, they can all of a sudden use Babylon, which yeah, I like this kind of just like like CAPTCHA helps transcribe books, right? But at the same time, allows security for websites. It's like, oh yeah, let's like merge mine with Bitcoin so we can enable checkpoints that help secure a Cosmos chain, provide transaction fees to Ethereum, and then make it allow for like faster unstaking. That's like a 21-day stake period on most of these
Yeah.
Cosmos chains. So I don't know if I even answered your question. I think I went on a little riff there about Avalon, but I'd say that, but yeah, in general, man, like it's very hard to have very strong opinions, I think, in crypto because there's just so many variables and so many unknowns. It's better to think in probabilities. And I can't tell you the future, but it would be It would be weird if Bitcoin wasn't here 10 years from now. It could happen, I guess.
Yeah. Prior to like all this USDC stuff, what kind of stuff was like popping up on your radar that really interested you before it was
Oh,
flooded with all this USDC stuff?
it's interesting. You mentioned Barachain. So I want to cover some of the stuff. Like you mentioned Barachain. It's interesting because there's a guy in our DAO named Surfy Sub, and he's got researchers like 10 to 12 hours a day, every day. And I heard their like podcast, and what's the biggest cult in crypto is Bitcoin, right? You have these like Bitcoin maxis now, right, with the stake and the machine gun, the whole thing, but like Bitcoin tattoos, right? Like that cultish behavior is usually pretty bullish.
Yeah.
And they've also there's a lot of overlap between Barachain and Olympus DAO. So they've thought
Yeah.
about like they've seen alternative L1s, like you mentioned, like Near and Avalanche and Phantom, Aurora get crushed by this mercenary liquidity mining. They're going to have protocol and like literally layer one protocol own liquidity. And so they're optimizing for really high level of cultish. I guess I don't know if that's maybe it's more bottom up, but it's incredibly culty. You listen to their like, it's like bong, it's like Smokey the Bear. They smoke like a lot of bong noises and they're just like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very memed out
They
in a
have
really
their
good
own
way.
lingo. They have their
Yeah,
like inside jokes. They have all of that.
exactly.
I think that's
Yeah.
also a nice aspect. But I do remember like I like Bearchain. I think the community is fun. I've been in their Discord a bunch. Like they're really cool, really fun guys to be around, and they're like super approachable, super helpful when you're like writing about them or anything like that. And the thing that is makes me hesitant a bit, and I don't know if you dabbled with a lot of this stuff previously, but I was in that world of magic internet money, even like the whole Luna stuff. There was like that cult following where people were just there. I forget who that one guy was on Twitter who had like a Luna tattoo. There was a bunch of that like this past bull market. I remember the Bankless guys had a debate about UST like a few weeks before it blew up. How dangerous do you think some things like that are? And do you ever like how I feel like being a part of multiple bull markets, you have to have some sense of reality that you can like tap into when everyone else is like basically zombie moving in one direction. You find yourself like in that crowd. You have to snap your fingers and wake up from that. How have you dealt with stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. I stayed in Bitcoin Cash like way too, and it was a huge costly mistake because I didn't realize it's very hard when because most L1, especially back then, there is a culture. There's people that talk to each other every day. There's events, there's meetups, right? In like in these alternative L1s, like Solana, Ethereum, even Aptos. I'm sure there's like a community, right? And much smaller ones, like man, I'm trying to think like Zen Chain. Yeah, you can go Hedera Hashgraph as like a community.
Yeah.
And I know they have I think they had a hack today actually. But what I mean to say is, so you get so into it and you're unable to, it takes a long time to step out and then step into another community. And so if you don't have that balance and you're unable to measure the level of engagement in your community, and then the amount of investment attention that like Ethereum had, I just kept ignoring it because I kept thinking for so long that Bitcoin Cash was like underrated. And
Yeah.
that was a big mistake. So like the culture is so important in Ethereum, hands down. It is like they have that cultural part, and that to me is like the stickiest part of Ethereum.
Yeah. But how do you wake up from something like that? What day? What was that realization for like specifically Bitcoin Cash as an example? Just wake up from that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's how I got into Uni Whales. So I had some tokens from this random altcoin that I bought, and I knew a buddy at the project, and this was like summer 2020. Like I missed most of DeFi summer, but it was like maybe July, August. I reached out to him and I was like, hey man, the token of your project is actually up. Like, where'd I go to trade it? And he was like, oh yeah, man, just use Uniswap. And I literally deposited in some like sketchy exchange like MEXC or something like that. And I was able to get my funds out and I used Uniswap and I had that light bulb moment. That's when I realized I had been sleeping on like that first swap for Uniswap.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do you think? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Do you think there's some risk for that in like the bear chain stuff?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, like also I don't know if they've exactly forked Evmos, but and like Kanto I think is definitely an Evmos fork. Like, we'll have to see how well. I really loved Cosmos, but they've had a lot of challenges and setbacks from Atom 2.0. And so how necessary is this? How long term is this? It's
Do
well,
you
I guess
find
all
yourself like
yeah.
using that ecosystem often,
No,
like in
never.
your own?
I'm not a big fan of Kanto personally.
Not
I think
Kanto,
that's
but like the entire Atom stack, the entire.
oh,
Are you in that world pretty often?
I would say this. I was following it quite closely and playing around with it. I probably didn't time it that well, but like the Osmosis and Atom community, and I was super hyped when Atom 2.0 came out. But actually, since the Atom 2.0 Fallout, I paid less attention to it. Having said that, I still own some Cosmos coins.
Yeah, I think it
I
also.
yeah.
There's been a lot of talk on different threads and stuff. People just talking about the idea of block space like demand. People talk about it when it comes to Bitcoin and their security. People talk about it in reference to the Ethereum and its burn rate and all those kinds of things. And you like in the Cosmos world, it's just more and more chains. And like the thing that I'm seeing is the highlighting of like their interoperability. And I've used it, like you said, I used Osmosis before. I was in like that whole world, and I feel like a lot of people were when the whole Luna and UST stuff was happening. People were bridging, people were actually using it. Do you think that like my biggest fear for that ecosystem is that we're building all of this space that no one is going to use? Do you think that there's some risk to that? I mean, because realistically, when was the last time you actually hopped on that chain? The last time I was on that is when I heard that I got a Luna 2.0 airdrop that was automatically staked or something, and I hopped on there and unstaked it. Now I'm waiting 21 days to get 200 bucks out. Other than that, I haven't been in that world. So do you? I feel like I'm falling for the idea that this kind of stuff is really not it's not needed right now, so I'm struggling to see the value in it. And I'm afraid something like that might happen with the bear chain world as well, and like whatever pops up next. What do you
Oh
think about
yeah,
that?
yeah. Don't get me wrong. I don't, and there's not that many details about Berachain. They keep changing like their protocol design, right? So yeah, there's tons of risk there. I think the only thing I'm certain about is like I think unless they really mess up like the launch, like Evmos did, and they had to, like restart halt the chain. Assuming they can launch the chain and they don't have any issues, which is not a given, I think they're gonna have their moment because of the cultishness. Whether it sticks around for the long time, I have no idea. And I think you are right in general that even with the optimism stack and like the L3s, et cetera, and the
Yeah,
DK and all these roll
pretty
ups,
competitive
yeah,
to what
yeah,
the
it's
miss.
yeah, maybe. But I think more than anything, you're hitting the nail on the head there. It's just there's so many blockchains with cheap block space, and like the amount of transactions like combined that we can do right now is like way more than the block space is being built. Like we haven't even mentioned Near and their pivot and all that. So yeah, I think yeah, in general, if we can get like the demand up for using this stuff, and if you would ask me like one thing, a lot of these use cases you and I talk about are pretty cool. Like interchain staking on Cosmos, I think is very interesting.
Yeah,
Babylon's very interesting. But like there's NFTs, I guess, are can be understood and pretty interesting to a lot of people, and they can grasp it much faster than DeFi. But like maybe if it stays as a very sub niche cryptocurrency industry, maybe the reason will be like it's not so abundantly clear to the average person why we really need this. Like the average person, yeah, the banks suck, but whatever, I use it. You know what I mean? And, that could be it. I'll tell you, I got in from a very kind of, I was very in, and I still am. Like I really appreciate a lot of the libertarian ideals about separating money from state. Like a lot of stuff that Eric Voorhees can explain a lot more eloquently.
yeah,
And but I'm also aware that we're a small fraction. Like a lot of people do not necessarily care about that. That's okay. But we're not like a huge, massive people. And anyone anyone with like liberty ideals, they've probably already gotten into Bitcoin. I don't think they're gonna discover in 2025. So it's gotta be different things that bring people in. And maybe it is gaming, which we can talk about too. But again, I'm not a gamer.
yeah,
But yeah, so does that make any sense?
yeah. I think I agree as well. I feel like that the Cosmos ecosystem has definitely been like they've proven to be right in terms of having multiple chains, and it's Ethereum. His roadmap has proved that they were right. I just because, for instance, Bearchain, they recently, I mean, they flushed out all of their funding. They raised everything. They're building as we speak. And like you said, they must have had to do some clear decision making on where they wanted to put this and like where it would work the most. And they chose the Cosmos ecosystem. So I think that has a lot to say about what that ecosystem can bring. And I'm excited to see like what these Parachain guys can do. I think they're gonna prove that a lot of the and like you talked a little bit, you mentioned the GameFi stuff. I grew up playing video games, but I think the video game thesis or GameFi thesis in this space comes down to like incentives, just like the TFI stuff really formed. I'm sure you watched all of the Blur stuff happening and tracked all of the wallets that were airdrop farming in that regard. How much do you think that sector is fueled by incentives versus actual promise? What's
Okay,
your
so
take on that NFT fi stuff?
yeah, there's a lot in there. So I just want to credit Cosmos. I think like Cosmos, like I mean, they invented proof of stake, man, and Tendermint consensus, and IBC still looks like the origin. I think that UIDX is launching a Cosmos chain. Like Terra brought a lot of development to the system. Obviously, it was like crash and burn as shooting star. So yeah, like Cosmos has contributed so much. Without a doubt, right? I think the interchain staking app chains, you see a lot of it mimic Instagram, of course. Yeah, so just to be clear, in innovation, you can contribute a lot. It does not necessarily mean that you'll survive. But without a doubt, Cosmos are already, to me, like heroes, like the Cosmos OG, what they've contributed to this ecosystem. I love Sunny, Zamplin, Jaquan, those guys. It's been great just listening to them on podcasts. It's amazing that you can, sometimes they look at like Jack Zamplin and Zaki Manian and Sunny together and just hearing them speak, it's motivating. But yeah, like to the Barachain stuff, I guess you're privy that they like finished a funding round. I wasn't aware. I know they were raising funds, but that's cool that they've got it down. But
Yeah, they got 420 million. They rounded that out a few months ago, and like they're just like firing on all cylinders.
420 million. I had no idea it was that much.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I could be inhaling a bunch of bullshit, but from what I know, that's what was said. But again, that's all mostly coming from fucking people that are holding like 30 beras or whatever the fuck. Take it with a grain of salt. But they were rumored to be raising that. Whether or not it closed fully is what 50-50 on. But yeah, I heard they launched it. And you saw it like very much leaning into utilizing NFTs. Like that is their whole thing. That's what everyone is using to gain exposure from them. They're talking about games and GameFi. They're talking about launching a gambling and bets book on the chain, a sports betting book, just a million stuff, and combining the NFT GameFi and like GambleFi ecosystem. That's what they're doing to grab attention from like people that are just regular users, people that are retail users. You have, how much do you value something like that when you see like Blur start to grow and gain like a lot of volume and a lot of users?
Yeah, so a couple of things. It's understanding where is it actual usage and where is it just incentive driven. Like many things, like it depends exactly what. But I'd say that I think the NFT-fi stuff is real. We've spent a lot of time trying to identify protocols and label them and make sense of them. Like we just add support for Paraspace this week, which was like super interesting. Some of the stuff they're doing. So I think there's like a lot of protocols on Arbitrum or Ethereum mainnet that are like part of the Barachain, like they're going to move to Barachain and from the NFT lending protocols, like you mentioned, right? And Llama Lend and Gumball and Caviar, which is kind of like SudoSwap, they seem to have roots there. So yeah, I think the NFT fi stuff to me is pretty cool, and I do think NFTs are something that are. I think NFTs are here to stay, and so if you can do some financial like maneuvering around it, great. Yeah, sure. A lot of the Blur stuff, but I think Blur also
Do you
when you can
use
address.
Blur often yourself?
I do. And you can, here's the thing. I don't like seeing Machi Big Brother have so much control. Like the Gitcoin NFTs that came up yesterday, 31%, people are just turned off. But like, what's the reality, man? The whole thing with NFTs that kind of drives me crazy sometimes, especially from people I've caught like soft rugging. I want to finish about, just like write this down. I think it's a point I want to put out today is just it takes way more courage to speak out against a soft rug usually than a full on rug or like FTX scam. And I'll explain that then. I want to say that for then because I think it's worth people like understanding why. But anyway,
Yeah.
with Blur, they hit on something that like a lot of people are like, oh, we're artists, we're about the community, we're creating these PFPs, and there are some really cool gen art stuff, and I love the squiggles, obviously, and certain things. But in general, artists are trying to make money because it's hard to make money in art. People are trying to flip like JPEGs or essentially, and they're just tokens, right? They're just not fungible tokens. They're just trying to
Altcoin.
flip tokens. And so Blur's, yeah, we know it's not really about the art. We're going to build a platform designed for flipping. And it's a huge product market fit. Obviously, some of the bidding and stuff was from that airdrop. But yeah, I think it's some of the volume's fake, but some of it's definitely real. And if you go to the amount of fee and what's it called on Kanto, man, there's no even swap fees on their native decks. Like they're the native decks of Kanto, there's no swap fees. There's so much wash trading in DeFi too.
Yeah.
That's like, so anyone like criticizing like NFT, it's like, oh, have you seen DeFi? There's a lot of, or like Vela Exchange, man, we added support for that. And I do think Vela could be really cool. And I like they actually have an OTC desk that a lot of people don't talk about. And it maybe this is how you grow into it, but every time I get an alert for 0x degen longed like the euro or JPY or Dogecoin, almost always get 30 minutes later they close their short or long position because they're farming. And so I know that's
Yeah.
fake.
Yeah. Do you think the idea of product market fit that Blur really targeted? And obviously NFTs grew their own product market fit, and Blur just, like you said, highlighted that specific aspect of NFTs in flipping and forgetting about the art itself. Do you think there's like, because I feel like sometimes the only thing to do in the crypto world, and that's taking majority of the volume, is the NFT world. It's the only really fun thing to do. Do you think that there's any other direct product market fit that you're like excited about? Maybe that you're like dabbling with yourself?
So are you saying that, do I have any questions around other types of product market fit outside of NFT flipping?
Yeah. Or are you seeing anything interesting that can actually be used that's not NFT?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell you one, like stable coins. So I live in Mexico, right? And
Mhm.
so it's not easy to like hedge Forex, right? It's very hard to, you have to drive to the ATM, et cetera, et cetera. So someone's working on stable coins for like non-dollar, like Jarvis Network's doing this. There's other projects doing it. I can't speak to the safety of it, right? That's the whole
Of
thing.
course.
But being able to like the Mexican peso has actually outperformed the dollar over the last year. And it's been flat over
Oh,
the last
wow.
5 years against the dollar. And so it's the type of thing where if the dollar gets strong against the Mexican peso, since I live in Mexico, I could potentially like hedge by moving USDC over to the MXN equivalent at a good rate. And then if I have to take in withdrawals, et cetera, I can always wait for it to come back. You see what I'm saying? There's manage my personal kind of international, I would say internet, but earning in dollars and living in an economy under a different currency. So I think like
Yeah.
it goes back
That's
to
pretty
stable coins,
awesome.
right? But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that, what else? I do want to add one thing to this whole,
Yeah.
I think that, yes, we
What were
mentioned
the
stable coins,
what was the soft drug aspect you were just mentioning?
oh yeah, dude. Okay. So man, I think that, do you know who Nadia of Pussy Riot is?
Yes.
Okay, so she was approached by Western NGOs and she protested Putin, went to jail. This was years
Hmm.
ago. Great, she
Yeah.
did activism work. I don't really want to talk about her activism work because this is separate. But she decided to launch like a Genesis community called AdCap Genesis, and I was one. A lot of us like bought these NFTs. They were expensive and they hit 3 ETH, and she made all these explicit promises. And and now it's like, yeah, the Sotheby's auction yesterday, and she's just been essentially a grifter, right? If you say
Yeah.
like, here's the thing, if you put out an NFT mint and say, you know what, Matt and Ali are putting out like they're like their meme NFT, there's no roadmap, it's just art. Don't mint it. You know what I mean? Like that type of vibes. Yeah, there's no, you don't have a guide to me. But when you say this is my Genesis, I have a team and we're like to entice people to buy, and then you just move on. Hey guys, have another mint, do mint after mint. Like people catch on, and I went into her Telegram group. I was just putting her next mint, and I called her out with like screenshots, and she just gave kind of very like rhetorical responses. She's like, I've raised money for charity. I was like, yeah, that's great. You've raised money for charity. Seriously, no sarcasm, but it has nothing to
Yeah.
do with the explicit promise you made for holders. She's like, it's about the revolution. And I was like, okay. Like, but it was cool because literally one other person reached out to me. They're like, Matt, thanks for like having the guts to speak up. And I think that a lot of times we'll see like, I think there's a lot of like unsavory behavior like that, like the soft rugs that happen where I'm calling out someone who's like a feminist activist. And again, I have nothing against like activism or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. But what I'm trying to say is she has that like,
Cult
uh,
following.
yeah, she has that cult following, but you
Yeah.
gotta stand up to these things. And I think like if I don't express these soft rugs and like flooding my own bags, like I did it on the Collabland drop, which will end up not being the Collabland team, but there was like someone was able to claim from a hidden API endpoint. If you don't call these things out, man, it's I think collectively we need to do that type of stuff, right? And I don't know if I don't think this whole like USDC like banking thing. This seems like a mistake. It doesn't seem like a FTX thing. But yeah, so I do want to emphasize that it's important to like call out soft rugs because like full rugs, it's like, oh, Seto had this project in Arbitrum, he just closed the Discord and rug pulled. Yeah, of course, like
Yeah.
that's like black and white. But it's more these gray areas where you like really call out people. And a lot
That's
of times
really
they'll delete you
important.
from chats, they'll block you, stuff like that. But of course, Zach XBT has he costs a lot, maybe not even like soft rugs, but full scammers, and he pays a price. but that's a very high level of research. But I think I'm sure you've come across soft rugs on DeFi projects and things like that, right?
Yeah, definitely. Talking NFT specifically, I saw me and Ali still talk about the action stuff. We were in that world with that like Anon guy for a while, and he talked about launching this, launching that, loads of different things. And then 3 days ago, he tweeted out that he's gonna launch another derivative that is an ordinals grip. And it's just like funny that people tend to take these things so seriously until it basically goes to shit, and then it just becomes a laughing joke forever. And yeah, being a part of those like soft rugs sucks, and like you feel bad for the people that are lost in the sauce and just believe whatever this founder is putting in the Discord over and over again. But yeah, just calling that stuff out is definitely very important for the people that are just like unaware.
Yeah. And so here's another thing that happens is like, and this is a tricky thing with launching a token gated community, which obviously I can speak to, is you don't. Most people are very naive. Okay, you do have some people that are scammers, right? But I think a lot of people, the types of people that like they owe you money and they just disappear because they're like non-confrontational and they're just like, oh, I'll just disappear. I think what
Yeah,
happens is I'm sure like Nadia started this and she doesn't like when you promise like, I'm going to build a community, then you like the incentives like I can just leave the Discord and just not do any work. The incentives aren't laden because like these NFT mints, they get all the money up front. And so
exactly.
and so also when you commit yourself to a community, it's like a little bit difficult to end. Like how do you gracefully end a community? Like I look at the Proof Collective who just tweeted during our call that hey, we did have money at SVB Bank and they raised like 70 million. You had these Proof Collective NFT passes that one point were like 128, and now they're like and now I think like Kevin, what do I do with the proof community? Because we had the proof community at the top, and then below them the Moonbirds, and then below them the IBs. Now the proof pass holders who are upset. You know what we'll do? We're gonna. It's a 3 year thing, so at the very end they're gonna be like the proof NFT passes, the 1,000 will convert into these like special moonbirds. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
almost like passing the potato. And I think Kevin Rose is definitely way more like reputable knowledge. Other, I'm not trying to call it Kevin Rose, but I mean to say is sometimes you create this token gated project with promises, and you realize how hard it is to live up to that promise, and that you're like committing to years, and
Yeah.
and so it can become like it's a huge responsibility. And I can speak to that.
Yeah. How do you list out those promises? Do you kind of leave it open ended? How do you deal with that kind of pressure, specifically to the Uniwills project?
Oh, it's simple, man. I just promised the metaverse. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's like just on this ridiculous NFT roadmap. You know how hard it is to build a metaverse, man.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, we're just strictly utility access to our community and our application.
Have you ever had to
And
like
yeah,
straight up boot somebody
oh,
from the group?
dude, it's
Like
funny.
people
There
that
was
just come in looking for trades and just calls and those like
yeah,
really annoying people?
yeah, because like when you introduced us, I think you said as a common like an alpha group. I think alpha does have a positive connotation, but we're not like sharing like calls and things like that. We're really trying to have higher level discussion and find new projects and look into transaction history. Just a slight clarification. Sometimes the
Yeah.
language can be
I mean,
misconstrued.
any closed group just gets perceived as like this weird alpha group that like some almost like a sports betting like calling group. I was talking to somebody about that connotation. One of the guys from Hunting Alpha. Alpha itself is just such a weird word in this space, and yeah, it just comes off weird. So I was curious how you like deal with those kind of people, especially because when did you guys launch exactly?
In November 2020.
Yeah, so
So
I'm
we've
sure
been
you
around.
experienced that like people that are just buying a token, hopping in, expecting the world kind of thing.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised how well the community is self-regulated. I don't know how this has happened, but just in terms of people that we've attracted and being like keeping it very low key. We don't flaunt who's in there. We don't like name
Yeah.
drop. We don't make promises. We never talk about the token itself. And like we just have 3 rules, just be cool, disclosure if you're like showing something that you're invested in, and yeah, try like to the top. It's pretty simple, and like we're all kind of adults.
Yeah.
And literally, there was one person that was like maybe slightly annoying with showing stuff, but slightly. And then people were like, "Yo, this guy needs to like cut it out," and they ended up like leaving anyway. So it wasn't like I never even really had to talk to them. It's been pretty amazing, man. We haven't had and plus now it's been good too because we have this one topic for like degen memes, and there's people that actually very smart people that they like to trade these very complex meme communities, but like they have their own channel, so it's like perfect for
Yeah.
them
That's
to
awesome.
talk
I
about it.
think that's
Yeah.
where the value really is. That's awesome that that community is invaluable. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very bullish on longevity. I talk to people about this all the time, but no one like cares about longevity in a world where you can make fast money. But I look at UOL's DAO, and we already hit 2 years, and I think like 80%. I'd have to check. It's all on chain, which is great, right? With the power of a token gated community, 80% of people that have been in 90 days are still here today. And December 2020 or November 2020, that's a long time in crypto, man. And we're gonna hit 4 years. I'm excited to see where like UW is at, where we hit 4 years. And I think that's like a slow it's like a slow, it's a bit of a slow burn, but like that type of compound growth, I think it's like really powerful and underrated. I'm just gonna like launch some like alpha chat today, and plus everything we have is centered around like the tooling we build. So there's like a there's it's not just a discussion group, but yeah, I think yeah, running a community is no joke. It takes a lot of effort. You got to pay attention to it, and yeah, I guess that's all I gotta say about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Props to you for being a part of creating something like that. That's really awesome. And I think just to close off here, I'm sure you got a lot of shit going on. Just for your own future self to look back on the pod in your like current headspace with all the craziness happening in the USDC, SVB, Silvergate stuff. See anything popping up that you want to like just mention? Or your like final thoughts on that topic? Since it's like the major one of the day.
It's like, yeah. I hope USDC keeps its take to $1. That's my main thought. I want to be bullish on USDC that it's $1 on Monday. That would be very bullish.
Yeah.
But yeah, like yeah, what else could it be besides that? And then I think also to all the people in like SVB Bank. Okay, I do want to say one thing that I guess we're gonna need better stablecoins. I don't want to. The time of this recording, like USDC might actually be fine, and maybe they only have 60 million in SVB that's in treasury bonds, and they're getting 90% of that. So as long as I don't know how many billion is in USDC, but as long as 90% of people don't redeem, we're good. And it might be a non-issue. And I'm hoping, like if it was a prediction market and I had 2-to-1 odds, I'd probably bet on that. Again, I don't know, but I guess what I want to say is that I think that one thing that I recognize sometimes is I don't like. I understand there is some friction with MetaMask and things like that and Gnosis Safe, but I think teams should be paid in stables. And so like the crypto startups that had their money in SVB, dude, you guys should be using crypto, because if we don't use crypto for our salaries and things like that, like how do we expect to onboard these quote unquote billions of users?
Yeah. It's like throwing away the whole point of what you're building, just using a bank.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, who knows, we might actually be bankless by the end of all this.
Yeah, we might be forced bankless anyway, so like
Yeah.
we'll have to do it. But of course, if I say that, and of course, and then USDC depegs, oh great, we held USDC and a notes to safe. But at least even then, like at least you're sitting on, you can control it, right? So if your funds are in danger, it's Silvergate, you couldn't do anything. It just got locked. And you have to call the bank. You may have to go in person to withdraw. Probably can't do it. But at least notes is safe. You got a chance to make a move if the worst case scenario happens. You could buy ETH, you could buy Bitcoin, you could figure something out, and at least you have that sovereignty. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time. I hope it was enjoyable. I hope you weren't lost too much time during all this craziness.
No, man, it was great. Let's keep the conversation going, man. I appreciate you. I hope you again. This will be a sound club. I hope you guys get to 100 episodes, and hope you have a great weekend, man. And I'm gonna sign off, spend some time with the family, and relax, man.
Thanks. All right. You have a good one, Matt.
You too, man. Bye.
See ya.